Thank you all for being here in this space or online for Memorial Sunday. Here at the Community Church of New York, as Reverend Jude said, and as Reverend Peggy said, this is the day set aside specifically for remembering whom we have lost. Remembering those we have lost. The word lost means two things. On the one hand, something that can't be found or something that has been taken away, but it also means, in a personal sense, not being able to find your own way. Being lost means being disoriented. Saying you're lost could mean not knowing which way to go, or it could also mean being unsure of who you are. Well, Memorial Sunday is about remembering anything, everything, anyone and anyone who is lost, even ourselves. This year, on Memorial Sunday, I myself am grieving, perhaps more than others, perhaps less than others. I am grieving my second cousin, Jude, whose beautiful life lasted only a few days. I'm grieving my grandfather, the patriarch in my family, who was very sick. Access to very good health care meant that he lived with dementia for many years, dying a little bit at a time for a very long time. Ultimately, though, this year, it was a COVID infection that ended his life. My family is grieving the youngest and oldest members of our family. I have also, in this time, lost a school hand-chosen by my family for my children, where intentional gentleness is practiced. Now, this is a school on the cutting edge of early childhood education. Skilled practitioners of emergent curriculum, vanguards in the world of independent schools. Closing because of financial insolvency, unable to promise a future. I have also lost a church this year, a church uptown whose corporate leadership, far removed from the congregation, in response to very real economic headwinds, chose to decimate the church's budget. All programming was eliminated, and with it, my position. Church work can be ruthless. We who choose it as a profession must be skilled in loving and losing. In this time of the pandemic, unprecedented clergy retiring and unsafe gathering conditions have been met with strong economic difficulties unlikely to improve. Many churches will not survive. I've heard similar stories of this from dear friends all across the city in church work. It's tough out here for a friar or a minister, if the case may be. The tree of life has fallen on my small house, writes Alice Walker. I thought it was so much bigger. What a thing to say about the destruction of your house. But I understand the sentiment. I also thought the tree that protected my small house looked bigger standing up. The metaphorical tree of life has fallen on all of our houses these past few years. And friends, I tell you, even if your small house has been spared, look around at our tattered world. Tell me you don't see the tree of life has fallen on many of our houses, in many of our lives. Now, whatever this tree of life may be for us, a symbol, a metaphor, I encourage you to consider, what is the tree of life in your life? Whatever it is, you must agree, there is a big old tree lying in the middle of what was once normal life. Our supply chains are inconsistent. The prices of everything seem either exorbitant or just inconsistent. We have lost casual relationships, friendships, at a time when they are most needed. Our time being increasingly commodified and socializing increasingly fraught with anxiety. The threat of terminal illness can be unnerving. For many of us struggling with the additional burdens of mental anxiety, the simple irritations of daily instability can seem insurmountable. People's constantly shifting and changing plans, internet inconsistency, Zoom problems, technical difficulties, communication mix-ups, not to mention the widespread illness we all must deal with. It can be all we do sometimes to simply keep our heads above water. Perhaps today on Memorial Sunday, we can also understand the sense of a tree falling in our life because something we loved hasn't come along with us these last couple of years. We grieve those whom we love, and alongside those whom we love, we are grieving who we were. In this way, we must also grieve ourselves. Perhaps we grieve the carefree version of ourselves pre-pandemic, who could love easily before these problems felt so existential. Perhaps today we grieve the simple pleasure of doing the good work when the work was good and plentiful. Perhaps today we grieve our changed yet still capable bodies, bodies once strong and cared for, but perhaps now strange, unfamiliar, or in pain. I know this feeling. My mother came to town. The first thing she did was put her hand on my shoulder. "Baby," she said to me, "I worry about your stress." Some of you may know that feeling. The tree of life is not necessarily just one thing. Perhaps what has fallen in our life is this intangible sense of certainty and stability in the world. Perhaps we took it for granted. As long as the tree of life stood tall, it seemed, we knew some things were true. Come with me on a memory trip. When I first moved to New York, my address was 31 Union Square West. I could walk out of my building into the lobby of the Blue Water Grill. And from that lobby, I walked out into a world strange and alien to me. Now, this was 15 years ago. But I found that New York City operated along similar rules that I knew already. And so 15 years later, I am still comforted by certain things here in New York that will never change. Its timeless beauty, the varied architecture still standing as living monuments to ages past, decades past, trends and styles in vogue when times were different. New Yorkers know this well. Facades always shift. Dangerous or crumbling human habitats are modernized for better or worse, and our city limps along, ever improving and ever disintegrating simultaneously. This churn of New York is a churn of life. Not so much death as decay or destruction. New York City maintains a strange, constant life through all manner of disfigurement. And yet, as a home for life, a hub of life, New York City feels immortal. The pandemic, to me at least, proved it. New York is immune to death. But we who ensure New York's immortality, we millions who make up its population, we are mere mortals. We are charged with keeping these memories. These past years, we have lost so many people in both senses of the word lost. And yet I see how we also have lost so much more than just those whom we love. We have lost entire ways of life, patterns of interacting and communicating that COVID has rendered unsafe. This interlocking network, connecting patterns of ways of living, is a tree of life itself. These varieties of ways of living in our society, this tree has already, in many ways, fallen. Back on my corner 15 years ago at Union Square West, I had a friend who always brought a folding chair with him and sat on the sidewalk outside. His name was Henry. Henry admitted to me he had stopped trying to control his weight around 250 pounds. He was diabetic and HIV positive, and told me he had been living with each in the same apartment for about 10 years. He talked about his HIV positivity and diabetes as roommates. He took an interest in the university students that crisscrossed our block, and he did make some money selling drugs to them. My friend Henry got in close with a couple of classmates. I heard stories of debauchery, danger, poor judgment. I watched from a distance while Henry, perhaps meaning well, yet perhaps also expressing a nihilism I had yet to fully understand, gave my friends and university students access to the means of self-destruction. Some recovered, some didn't. I suppose I'm grieving them as well today. Now, Henry and I spoke often over the course of many years about his health, his children, his money. For years we would run into each other. He was a fixture at Union Square. Yet I haven't seen him in a while. For some of us here in this city, death looks more like this. I haven't seen them in a while. A slow vanishing. The gentle fade of time and clarity as layers and layers of urgent events pile on top of these bittersweet memories. Yet never fully vanished, I argue. There is an eternal quality to these ghosts that line our city's past. Each one of us holds a unique tapestry of them, an individualized map of this city. For me, Union Square will always represent Henry. Whenever I found myself there at Union Square, I would make my way to the Blue Water Grill just to see if Henry was still around. At Union Square, that corner is a Korean restaurant called Barnju now. The familiar scaffolding that I navigated for years has been moved across the street. In this way, street corners across Manhattan become branded with the memories of single events. Now, I may be grieving Henry, but it is also possible he is still doing what he was doing somewhere else. Maybe he found a new corner. Perhaps more accurately, what it is I am grieving is that corner of Union Square West and East 16th Street. It will never be the same. Closure, I think, is unfairly advertised as a cure-all for loss, grief, or traumatic experiences. Closure as some magic elixir to end uncomfortable feelings. Closure can end this messy business, it is said. But rather than closure, instead, today, let's seek a sharing. Let's discover in conversation whom those around us are grieving. Individuals, people whom we loved, street corners filled with culture. Know that many in this room and joining online have struggled or are struggling with loss, great and profound and irreversible. Today, let's begin again the work of learning how to remember. I suspect for me, as for many of you, no matter what happens in the coming months, as construction teams tear down old buildings and build new things instead, this area, in particular the corner of 35th Street and Park Avenue, between Madison and Park, this place will always brandish memories and imagined visions of the decades this place, this church, has offered our city. How many people could have lived here, worked here at Community Church, who have made their way from nothing, inspired by the earnesty and passion found at Community Church? How many? None of us here could ever know that. Especially not me. I was hired in August. I never got to see the cool stuff that happened inside that building. But I can imagine it. Even if I can't remember it, this block will be emblazoned on my tapestry of New York. For those of you who can remember, know that memory is a gift. It is a gift that those of us who possess it can so easily take for granted. It is possible to lose memories. Some of us with little experience may take that reality for granted as well. We can lose not simply memories themselves, but all remembering, the capacity for recall. Memory is a superpower of mental and imaginary time travel. Memory allows us to know how we arrive at one place or another. When this gift itself is lost, to be unable to remember yourself, to remember your children, to remember your life, this is a small death. The capacity to remember is a gift itself. Remembering cannot be taken for granted. It must also be intentional. The reflex of remembering prefers familiar patterns, but we must practice recalling memories that otherwise we would not. I find it particularly amazing that we can remember things that have been forgotten. Just think of the implications of that. Experiences or events that have been truly lost to us. We can recall them and reclaim them with the power of our mind and community. Now, neuroimaging assures us that this recall bears striking similarity to the presence of actual visual stimulation. Now, what does that mean? It means that remembering an event in our minds is not so much different than actually being there. You must have recognized in many traditions that gather just as we do There is a great power in collecting and preserving lineages, the passing of generations, these names that we felt upon our quilt, our quilts of belonging. Community Church, those of you here and present, as well as everyone gathering online, all of us at some point must grieve. It is true that this church in this moment has also lost more than most. Those closest to this community, who were here through the church's many phases and iterations, perhaps have the most to remember. I'm grateful to our elders present with us for keeping these memories now. It is a treasure we in our Western culture are always in danger of losing. Alice Walker writes, "I am adrift without my tree of life that has fallen heavy without grace or pity on this small space." Our world is adrift. The tree of life has fallen, and aimlessly we float. Last year on Memorial Sunday, Reverend Peggy reminded us that we let go sometimes for dear life. We compassionately release those on the edge of death into what we fear with consolation and encouragement. We say gently, "It's okay. Things will be fine." We say it even if we don't know. We say it as a gift. Sometimes this letting go is the grace most called for in a moment, and sometimes not letting go is the gift offered us in a moment. Sometimes we let go for dear life, and we need not always simply let go. Sometimes it is time to hold on, to clutch tightly, to remember. This transition we experience from presence to absence, from doing the remembering to being remembered, and then eventually being ourselves beyond remembering. These transitions are holy. These transitions are sacred. Remembering is the responsibility of those of us with the capacity to remember, and those of us present to remember. When performed in community, as we do today, it is the act of human culture that is most ancient and most ubiquitous. Let's not be in a hurry to move past that part, the part where we do the remembering together. Let's not be in a hurry today looking for closure. Let's not be in a hurry in the days to come to regain a sense of composure or to act normal. Let's not be in a hurry to make everyone think we are okay. I don't think today we're called to act as if everything is okay. These are times of change, and now is as good a time as any to figure out how to change together. It's an opportunity for us to relearn remembering. Now, don't get me wrong, we have done magnificently in this time, responding to the needs of the moment. Together, we have learned Zoom. We have learned self-care. We have learned COVID masking. We have done all of it. Every moment is different. But church, the damage of isolation and loneliness, of siloed existence, has already been done. For better or worse, our world is transformed. We have endured this. With it, much loss and death. And friends, it is unlikely to stop now. Our world today and in the future needs us to remember and preserve, protect what it will not remember. We can imbue our cultural fabric with the power of our memories, and it is a burden that we need not bear as individuals. Let's bear it together as a church. These institutions that are disappearing, the school I mentioned losing, the church I mentioned losing, these institutions, these community gathering spaces, perhaps capitalism might deem them superfluous or recreational, unnecessary in some way. We who are here know they are vital to the life of humankind, and we are doing the work of relearning how to be that with each other, for each other. This is our holy promise, the promise also to remember each other. The call to change in our world is loud and clear. With all of that change comes loss. Church, in that call to change is our call, the call to remember.